All right, well, let's get started. I have a very short introduction on the South Florida Regional Planning Council and how this webinar series came to be. So a little bit of background, the South Florida Regional Planning Council is one of 10 of Florida's regional planning councils. We cover 3 counties, Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe. It is one of the most densely populated areas of the state, and we cover all types of planning topics. So we provide environmental and resilience planning, economic development and modeling, land use and growth management. So any of the comprehensive plans that are being produced in this region go through us for review and then to the state. We provide geographic information system services and field remediation. So there really isn't much that we don't do. And we're here to provide technical assistance and planning support. So that is one of the major factors for hosting this webinar series. There's a lot of amazing projects coming out of our region, and we wanted to provide an opportunity for our local governments to share those resources, the best practices, and what they've learned. So this is the first of 3 webinars. Our second one is Dune Systems and Living Shorelines on June 17th, which is next Tuesday. It's from 12 to 1:30. We're going to have representatives from the city of Hollywood, Adopt a Dune, and Kind Designs, which is a new business startup from Miami, and they 3D print seawalls. And they have a lot of different techniques to make them more environmentally friendly. And our third is utilizing innovative stormwater fees for resilience projects. And we are going to be sharing 2 projects coming out of the city of Fort Lauderdale and city of St. Petersburg, and they changed their stormwater fees from a flat to a tiered rate system to better capture what the effects of having an increased amount of pavement on your property are for the entire community. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, David Griffin from the South Florida Water Management District.
All right. Okay, well, thank you, Mary. Pleased to be here. Thanks for having us. Pleased to give you all an insight into the type of work that the district is currently doing from an implementation and nature-based solution perspective. We've had a lot going on. Okay, I'm already having problems. Something's frozen here. Hold on. There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm sure there's some folks here that might need a little refresher, an update on the South Florida Water Management District.
I'm sorry, David, we can't see the screen.
You can't. Must not be. Was working earlier.
Well, I just pulled it up for you, if that's okay.
Sure. Okay. There we go. Okay, do you have control? There we go. Okay, everybody can see that now?
Mm-hmm.
All right, good. Okay, just the backdrop on the South Florida Water Management District. It was created in 1949. It's the oldest and largest of the state's 5 water management districts. It extends from Orlando, 16 counties down to the Keys. This is all up to date, serves a population of 9.5 million residents. In fact, we do have actually updated numbers of everything. We have 2,200 miles of canals, like 21, 30 miles of levees, 936 water control structures. That moved on. Okay. 620 culverts, 98 pump stations. So that's a lot of infrastructure, even by itself, without the crush of climate change and sea level rise that you can imagine the task at hand. So the district's mission is to safeguard and restore South Florida's water resources and ecosystems, protect our communities from flooding, and meet the region's water needs while connecting with the public and stakeholders. Okay, so the flood protection responsibility is really three-tiered. You have the primary systems controlled by the Corps of Engineers in the district. You have secondary canals, secondary systems that are controlled by the local governments and special districts, and then tertiary by the homeowner association and private landowners. That certainly tertiary is kind of hit or miss there, but you will see if you go out to some of the canals, you'll see Army Corps structures, pump stations, gateways or sluices and whatnot on similar canals. So, and we're obviously all in the process of upgrading the whole system. So, okay. Obviously, when we're starting to lean into nature-based solutions, we got to see how things have changed. I mean, it's really kind of amazing this for the last 100 years, the amount of landscape changes in the South Florida region. And I mean, it actually kills me because this is about 100 years, but then that's still 30 years ago. I have a daughter that was born in 1992. It's crazy. So obviously, lots of it has even happened since then. But obviously, the natural systems, the shrub wetlands, the saltwater marshes, they were all really good at managing and treating superficial water flow. By attenuating, storing, and infiltrating flow excesses from storms and creating conditions to treat water, water quality constituents like nutrients, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And without those, we obviously get flooding and red tides and fish kills and whatnot that's happening right now. And we can't obviously restore what was historically there. We should try and plug in, these types of features wherever we can into our environment currently. I mean, that said, though, the district for the last 25 years has been involved, a key player in the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, primarily through reservoir and filtration marshes being added in along the way. Okay. So nature-based solutions, again, this is something that's been recognized as being practiced by numerous entities within the U.S. and globally, the Corps of Engineers, NOAA, FEMA, and there's international guidelines. And if you notice, most of these definitions, they include some sort of description of integration of natural and engineering processes. It's, again, we're playing on the whole green and gray infrastructure. Again, a little bit more nature-based solutions. You can include both green and natural infrastructure, just sort of different nomenclature. The former is where you're working within a built environment. The latter is often restoring, enhancing, and expanding on an existing natural system. And then you have the greening up of, if you want to call it greening up of our gray infrastructure with stormwater, making them a hybrid to enhance more resilient, related benefits, and also hopefully providing uplift economically and socially. Okay. And then here's just some examples of some nature-based solutions, and ones at the top more or less are solutions for existing natural systems that need some help to become more resilient. Maybe you're expanding them. Maybe you are just restoring them. You're just trying to bring habitat back for whatever reason. And then towards the bottom, you're getting more things that we are trying to incorporate into our built environment to mimic the benefits that they provide. Okay, and this is actually in our annual report. So this is kind of like showing you how we're starting to integrate these things into our projects. You'll see basically based on solution types being considered based on the primary missions that we have. So through river canal control, the types of green infrastructure they might be considering, and then the locations, whether it's watershed and floodplain, whether it's urban or coastal. And then the corresponding gray infrastructure to be worked in with it. This is all relatively new, and we're still working through this, both internally and also with some of our project partners. And then just some examples of some viable nature-based solutions. Some of these work really well with us because of our right-of-way constraints, like bioretention swales. Obviously, we could do floating wetlands and maybe some of our STAs. You'll see a terrace planting here in a little bit, and also a living seawall. It's good to hear that you guys are having a talk on that coming up. We'll definitely have to attend that. Okay. Okay, so this is our annual report that's going to change to a 5-year report and basically outlines the rigorous processes used to identify and rank all the priority projects. We come up with a priority projects list and then pursue throughout, the coming years. It basically provides the latest update for those that advanced into the implementation phase. It's pretty cool. It includes an interactive map to find project locations and relevant info. Okay. And as part of that, that actually this past spring, what we'll do is we'll put out a draft the report and we send it out. We try to receive input on priority projects. We'll travel around. We went to 4 locations. We had about 200 attendees, and just basically receiving input on the draft work plan, things that we feel like we want to incorporate within each of those regions that can make it a better product for us and for them. Okay. And this is like a highlight page of the one that we've had this year, which we've completed. Some of the highlights included needing to align local and regional flood risk projects. Regional collaboration is obviously the key. There's a need to continue to share and leverage already available models. The district shares technical resources to local governments for their design and implementation projects. So it's great to coordinate on that level. Typically, with these workshops, nature-based solutions has always been discussed and been brought up to be something that should be prioritized within each group. That was one of the outcomes. Okay, Mary. And then just a summary, we have the public workshops, like I mentioned. The draft was released. The public period, you have 1 more week if you want to get in and comment on it. And then the final plan submission will be September 1st. And then really this just kind of shows where the priority implementation projects are, what they are. I mean, there's a wide range of structure replacements, refurbishments, 4 pump stations, tieback flood barriers. Basically, a lot of projects that we're doing, all these structures on the East Coast are gravity fed, and they cannot keep up with sea level rise. So we're having to basically we have no headwater, tailwater difference. So we need to put in forward pumps or at least temporarily raise gates so that we could get that gravity flow until we can get the money in grants to improve the pump stations or to improve the flow through those areas. And some of the projects are including nature-based solutions, and you'll see some of that coming up. Okay, Marion. Okay, so part of that, when we talk about our stakeholder engagements, we include them at different stages of the project, starting from initial coordination, during flood protection, level service modeling. We'll gather their input during the development of the adaptation and mitigation strategies, as well as during the final design phase. So there's lots of coordination going on throughout the projects. Okay, and one of them is it's more of a basin-wide strategy. We have a number of these going on with C7, C8, and C9 basin resiliency. It's a lot of these are again trying to combine green and gray infrastructure. These are coastal structure enhancements or replacements from the conditions that I described earlier. Really, they're just trying to restore the discharge back to what was supposed to be there to provide flood protection. The sea level rise is preventing that from happening, so we're having to look at these to increase the capacity. And then you'll see some of these projects are incorporating some nature-based solutions as well. Okay, man. So for C9, this is a gated spillway replacement. So in this case, they're going to have to add a pump station to provide the flood protection necessary. And there are nature-based solutions enhancements at Pickwick Lake, which is owned by the city of North Miami. Miami-Dade on this project is involved in doing some secondary canal enhancements on 13 canal banks, and then South Broward is installing some sluice gates with green walls. So this is a Pickwick Lake site that's associated with the C9. This is for the city of North Miami Beach. So they identified this lake, 16-acre stormwater retention. They're going to be improving outflows and adding some living shorelines. And this is a very active area. There's a trail you can sort of see between the green lines over there. It's basically a pedestrian and bike path that's highly used. And there are some invasive species that are going to be replaced, along with some of the living shorelines. And then here's just a plan view showing the new culverts. There, I believe there's like 36-inch culverts. And then they're going to install vegetated living shorelines along the canal, which is to the north there on the top side. And then also around Pickwick Lake itself. And just it's just a typical detail where you have the proposed rubble and you're creating a sort of a shelf, marsh shelf behind it. And it's probably a combination of both preventing erosion along the bank, which I believe is happening along the one side where the trail is. A lot of it's just because of maintenance, but there is a little bit of fetch involved with that canal. It's kind of open water area. So there's not, this is creating more habitat. It's also creating a condition where you're preventing additional erosion or erosion to occur. And same thing, this is actually around the lake, very similar, just on a smaller scale. But they're, instead of the rocks, they're going to be using these fiber logs as their limit of where the shelf will be built in. And C7 resiliency, it's similar. It's a structure replacement with a 1500 CFS forward pump station and then a tieback flood barrier. This is actually interesting. This school at W.H. Turner School site is actually an agricultural school. And that pond you can see in the upper right is utilized by, they have, I don't know, 15, 20 head of cattle. It's crazy to see this in North Miami, but they're there. I think they are looking at enhancing that pond size to just get a little bit more flood storage and water quality benefits as well. And then there's a segment, actually, I think it's going to be the next slide. Go ahead, Mary. Yeah, these areas along the canal, it's currently laden with invasive species and failing walls. So they're going to be incorporating a living seawall there. At least currently, that's what's on the plans. And then they're going to increase that size of the stormwater pond, like I mentioned, and then removing some of the exotic vegetation. They don't say it's funny. The recreation features, it's a shaded gathered area. I really think that's for the cattle, because this is one of the things that the people at the school said. Well, this cattle need that shade, so when we take out the invasives, we're going to put something back for them. Anyway, that's part of the plan. Okay, and then just implementation status for these projects is a DEM and FEMA funding, as well as district ad valorem, Miami-Dade counties, and money's coming from them too. The status is survey, design, permitting going on. They've submitted environmental and historic preservation deliverables for FEMA review. The design schedule for these is for complete actually this month, and then construction to start in the fall, and it will go on for about 3 or 4 years. Okay, this is a project that I'm working on right now. It's kind of different. It's an innovative technology grant that we got through DEP. It's really to target, this is a joint with Miami-Dade, with Dern. It's a target for algal blooms. So we're studying 3 different technologies: Poseidon pellet, smart sponge, and Bolden Gold. All of them have affinity for nitrogen and phosphorus uptake. So we're creating this lab essentially parallel to Snake Creek. We're going to pump water out, run it through each of these, and they're going to be tested against each other. And then we're going to have one that's combined. And then through a whole wet season, we are still in the preliminary design stage of this. Hopefully the design will be completed. We'll have constructed at the end of the year. We'll be able to capture next wet season with this data. So this will be great because it can be used by the Miami-Dade or really anybody based on the results if they want to implement these in some sort of BMP to improve water quality in the watershed. Okay, and then this is a separate project. It's a general canal enhancement project. where again, this one is sort of more nature-based solutions because we're looking at ways to um, store wetlands, inside and outside of the canals, providing maybe some berms along the outer edge of the way to enhance outer bank flooding, and then maybe working on some hydrology connecting the wetland to the Senon Canal. So that's ongoing as well. Okay, and just a kind of a shout out about all the tools that we have available, and this is something that you can either gauge and just become aware of what's going on. You can even join in, and it's a flood information resources. Basically consolidates, centralizes regional flood observations. They're always looking for help. This is available. This is really great once the king tide season starts. I guess usually it's August up to November. We try to get people to go out and collect data, send us pictures. Anybody can do it and send it in. It's amazing how important that is for that information to come in to augment and help our folks that are trying to model these events as they're going on and into the future for mitigation. And then this is just a shout out for our resiliency coordination forums we typically have here. Our next one, this is typically we have folks that come in, our project partners, if you want to know what's going on. It's a great event to show up to and find out. So our next one is September 3rd, and then we have another one December 3rd as well. And you can subscribe for the district resiliency updates. Yeah. I'll leave that as is. And we do the coolest work on the planet. How about that? I think that's all I got, Mary. So I'll take any questions.
Thank you, David. I had one question. But so depending on how people are feeling, you could put questions in the chat or you can raise your hand. If anyone isn't familiar with Zoom, you can raise your hand by going to the React button at the bottom. And then once you click, there's going to be a raise hand button, and that'll let us know that you have a question. So whichever individuals prefer. I was wondering if you could talk a little more about the recreational aspects of the project adjacent to the school and how you determined what you were going to do.
Recreational aspects of it.
Hmm.
Um, the one with the school with the living seawall.
Yeah.
Yeah, there isn't much in the way. I wouldn't necessarily call that one recreational. Probably the other one, Pickwick Lake, has a little bit more of that because of the pedestrian trail. Um, the one with the school, they were just looking at ways to try to incorporate, nature-based solutions, and that's one of those. It's typical. It's a site again where our canal system, the right of ways that we currently have for things like this, were sort of limited. So the living seawalls was an option. It seemed like the only option to do without having to acquire additional right of way for something that we can't really kind of quantify a greater benefit to it. But like I said, it was interesting to see the an ag school that far down in an urban environment. But they are looking at enhancing that pond to try to provide a little bit more water quality relief because it is an ag field. It's basically a pasture. But as far as recreation, there's not a whole lot of recreation from a recreation perspective on that project, Marion. Does that help at all? Or
Yeah, thank you.
okay. Mhm.
All right, so seeing no questions in the chat and no raised hands. Um, and if you think of any throughout the presentation, we can just circle back at the end. So I'm going to pass it on to Debbie Love from the city of North Miami.
Hi, Marianne. Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to be here today to share a little bit about our project, the North Miami Good Neighbor Stormwater Park. I'm going to have to turn my camera off. I seem to be getting a little problem here. So, okay, now I'm not getting the feedback. My apologies for that. Whenever you're ready, thank you, my friend. Okay. Before we go any further than this, and I tell you a little bit more about the actual stormwater park, this project started because the city had some repetitive loss lots that we bought in the 1990s, and they just sat vacant. You'll see an aerial view of this particular site shortly. And in the around 2018, we decided to take a look at how can we use these parks. We were thinking, well, they weren't parks at the time, these lots. They would have to be passive, they could not be active. And how can we transform them into safe, usable spaces that can bring the community together in some fashion? But we also wanted to adapt to climate impacts over time, as well as get points for CRS to reduce our flood, continue to reduce our flood insurance impacts. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the park, I want to set the context here. This is where we're located here in North Miami. Next. And at that crosshatch, you can kind of see us in the regional context. This is where the stormwater park is. And do you give me the next slide, please, Ben? Okay. So where you have that X, what this is, what you're looking at here is an 1840 survey of South Florida. And where that X is, as you saw it translate to today, this is the deepest part of an old slough. And this is the waters of Arch Creek, and Arch Creek still exists. And you can see how that flowed northeast all the way down into Biscayne Bay. And the stormwater park, where it is now, again, is in the really deepest part of the slough. Yeah, next slide for me. As you can see here, in this area, that's the site I was told that this is located at. You can see that it is in the midst of a residential neighborhood, and it has homes on three sides. The site still floods, and portions of the ground remain spongy even in the dry season, which is where we started this project. Frankly, it provided very little community benefit. It was just a constant mucky, mosquito prone double lot. Next slide. So this project, we were very fortunate because about that time, Van Allen Institute had initiated a project called Keeping Current. And they approached, it was, the full title was a Sea Level Rise Challenge for Greater Miami, by the way. And that was launched in April of 2019. And so we applied, and we had two projects. This was one of them that we proposed. And we proposed that it would not only do what we wanted it to do, is to actually, as I said earlier, respond to climate changes. But we also wanted to have it where, is there a way for us to have a demonstration of what the different biomes were that we've sacrificed to development over time, as well as it be in educational and have an artwork component. Next slide. So in this particular instance, the city, while we ended up with one design team, they put out a call internationally for architects and designers from all over to submit proposals that reimagine and repurpose these lots. And out of 40 proposals, 3 designers were selected as finalists, and they were asked to travel down here to Miami and North Miami and meet with the residents to hear about their hopes for this particular lot located at 901 Northeast 144th Street. And so those designers, next slide, they came in and we did an initial community survey of the neighborhood, reaching out to them to see what they liked, what they enjoyed doing. And as you can see, a lot of that was walking. And so they, after talking with them, some of the proposed solutions that Van Allen and their team did was to propose something with plants and walking paths and some sort of community programming, and that this could be scalable was also very important to us, by the way. So what happened then is that we wanted to take a look at what they thought was a good thing that they wanted to see in that neighborhood. So we created space and activities to engage the neighbors through a variety of activities before we even put out the call to artists. And we did, once the call to artists came about, we then had a series of what I call speed dating with the designers. Next slide. And that's where residents actually met and networked and chatted with one another and the design team. And next slide for me. And at these events, the folks came to different venues that we had. They networked with each other. They met with each of the 3 design teams that were ultimately selected as multiple slides. Go ahead, next, hit next. And go backwards, I'm so sorry. There's a couple of different pictures in the previous slide, Marion. There you go. You can see they're all embedded in different activities that we held within the city. I'll just tell you about them. Again, like I said, we did the speed dating. They met. It was so popular. We had food, of course. That was absolutely important to bring in folks. And we really wanted to build trust with the community because, quite frankly, the neighborhood consisted primarily of minorities who were very leery of meeting with anything to do with the government. So it was really important to get the team of outreach folks that could gain their confidence, and they went door to door to get people to come out to these events. They were very successful. So then when we come back, next slide, please. Go ahead. So this is typical of what stormwater piping looks like, right? This is hidden away. You really never know that the community has no idea what it is. They don't know that it becomes invisible. So you really don't understand how it works. And we felt that education was very important. Go ahead, next slide there. One of the main goals here, as I said, was to kind of red pill, if you will, the residents and users about, the here and now of flooding. Usually drainage, as I said, is underground or hidden. So part of the design was that we wanted to make that invisible visible. And the park accomplishes that through a bioswale that circumscribes the site. Go ahead, next slide. And here's the bioswale that circumscribes the site, and a low-tech solar-driven, you can see this panel here, that's the solar-driven pump, and above-ground pumping system. We can go next slide. And how it works is that's the deepest end of the slough, as we're calling it, the bioswale that transcribes the site. And it goes, and I'll talk to you a little bit in a moment about the actual biomes that we restored. But this is how it works. Once that deepest part of that bioswale tops over that, it automatically triggers that pump that will then pump that through that pipe, through the typical blue pipe. But we wanted to use that, next slide. We wanted to use that blue piping as seating, as design, as play for folks. So that in reality, the green above ground infrastructure is not just another hidden engineering drainage project, but rather it creates interaction with the users of the park. Next slide. Okay. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of the presentation, because for me, it was really important that and I'll tell you about the project itself, but really that when you're in an urban environment, you have no idea what was here before. It was all, as far as most people know, this was always asphalt, this was always concrete, but it really wasn't. So the proposal, the winning proposal, featured a retention pool that can hold water that would otherwise flood the nearby homes. Inside the pool, there's an art piece that just to indicate, that uses physical markers, and part of the design team included a very famous Haitian artist, Adler Guerrier, and I'll show you that in a moment, who designed a lot of the signage in there. I designed a bat box. I designed also these features, these water features, and they are to indicate, to make it obvious the current level of flooding. And come to find out, this is inland, as I showed you how far inland this is. This is actually tidally influenced. You can see it, you can see it move. When you drop something on one end of the pond, you can see it float over to the other end. So that's pretty amazing how far inland it is. But when you think about it, all that water is still under our feet. When we started this project, the first thing we did was to bring all the design team out to the site. And we dropped a pair of the post hole diggers into the ground. And at 18 inches, water was right there at 18 inches. So just one big scoop out of that post hole digger was water at the bottom. So surrounding the pool, you'll see that there is a walking path, and it's lined with the diverse plant systems that used to be here, the ecosystems that were sacrificed due to development. And during the excavation of the basin, the water immediately entered the pond. And really all it consisted of was a backhoe that, and of course, I'm simplifying it because it had to be topoed and engineered, but essentially as soon as you started taking that backhoe and scraping, the water immediately filled the pond. And again, as I said, it was tidally influenced. Next slide. So if we had at the end of this project to celebrate, on December 15th, we held a festival and a block party with food and games and music at the site. It really is just to celebrate the grand opening and the success. The neighbors loved it. They turned out. We had a lot of fun. And here are some, I just want to share, if you just click, here are some photos of the park with some of the interpretive signage that was designed by Adler. And you can just keep clicking through. The visitors really enjoyed the various features, including benches, as I mentioned. You can keep going. The bat box, and going into the different biomes. There are butterfly gardens that are there, and just strolling through the shaded hammock. And you can see how beautiful that is. Families really enjoy going to the park. It has, the trick has been to maintain it and give it a, keep it maintained. But once it was established, it required no further irrigation. Now, the park's efficacy was really challenged on, as I said, 10 days, about approximately 10 days after the ribbon cutting. we had one of the largest, heaviest rainfall events that had occurred here in South Florida, with 4.5 inches dropped in 1 hour. Now, the park was designed to accommodate about 150,000 gallons of water and protect 20 surrounding properties. Next slide. As you can see, right after the storm, the piping is underwater. Now, it outperformed its design, but due to typical when you have that type of flooding, the road drains were clogged, and so it also held the runoff from the road. So instead of days of standing water spread throughout the neighborhood, as our unfortunately happens all the time, even in minor storm events. On day 2, next slide. There's the pipe underground, still buried. Next slide. Okay, this is day 2, 2 days after the storm event. These were taken by our public works engineer, who went out to, all of us were holding our breath as to what would happen. And this was day 2 of that event. And go next slide. Now, the park, before I tell you some of our little tips and tricks that we learned, and hard ways of getting through things here, this park has this little jewel in the middle of the city. It's had many visits from federal, state, and county agencies. We were kind of the first in this area in South Florida to do something like this. There's been a lot of media interest, a lot of write-ups in various publications, as well as feature on TV. We've won the American Planning Association Award of Excellence for Sustainability, and have been recognized as best practice in numerous publications, including one put out by the Netherlands. So next slide, go ahead. So part of this project also included, as I mentioned earlier, to make these things scalable in the city. So part of the job was to also create a master plan. And it identified 2 priority opportunity areas for installation of additional stormwater parks, and looking at how we can expand these throughout the city. Next slide. So, as I said, the goal was to allow us to expand these parks throughout the city. So we wanted to figure out how we can build on this one little pilot project to expand the network, and where it would be appropriate. I also was looking for a master plan that would be flexible enough for various lot typologies, with the idea that we believe that by building multiple stormwater parks in the city, it will have truly compounding benefits and mitigate the adverse effects of sea level rise. We are blessed to have FIU in our city. They have some of their modeling has indicated that for every foot of sea level rise, there'll be a 40% correlation into the interior. And we are a tale of 2 cities. We have a lot of expensive properties on the ocean side, and then we have a lot of inland. So we are a tale of 2 cities in that regard. We're split by canals. So the parks give us a scoring point into the CRS. Go ahead, next slide. So here's the typology, the light typology. And so they're designed for mid-block, everything, addressing things from mid-block to through block, corner. And so we have an opportunity to, as we continue with our stormwater network, that we are already prepared to apply these elsewhere in the city. So with this up here in front of you, I just want to share a couple of challenges we had. And while we got all of these grants, we had a grant from Van Allen, we had private folks contributing, we had grants from FDEP, we had donations of additional trees and plantings. Um, that part of it was the fun, the easy part. The hardest part was being first out of the gate on something that was this unique, educating Miami-Dade County engineers in what this was, because they were treating it like a typical retention pond where you're going to have this and this slope, and you have to have fencing around it, and it has to be done this way, to sharing with them this idea. It also was interesting to just bring internal staff along, because unless you see how this works and function, you really, it's like, what is that? I don't really understand it. So being able to communicate not just to the residents and engage the residents, but there's a bigger component, or almost a bigger component, with the with your fellow teammates. Sometimes it's just and even with your council members. Fortunately, they were wise enough and visionary enough to understand how this will help the community. Those were some of the challenges that I think being first out of gate in any idea is, educating other government entities and agencies. And when they FDEP was the first to sign on to this concept, and we appreciate them supporting us right from the get-go. But others were not quite there yet, and some of the engineers were having a challenge wrapping their mind around the concept that not everything that holds stormwater has to be a detention pond, or it can be bioswale, and it can be other things that are green infrastructure, such as our stormwater park. Um, and I do want to just close on this quick note, and I really, again, I appreciate being here. Um, we want to expand this. Flooding is becoming really serious in South Florida, as everyone knows. We were working on a septic tank study to kind of identify where our septic tanks were in the city. And we discovered that the water table had risen 1.5 feet over a 20-year period. And so we know that flooding is going to occur. Where you think sea level rise, we always think of sea level rise. We really don't look at how in Florida, there's a direct correlation, even inland, and how South Florida was really built over top of a lot of water. So as we start thinking about stormwater drainage, we really need to look closer at uh, restoring landscape, restoring spaces for that become absorbent, native vegetation, using something along this line of stormwater, a series of stormwater parks. Or I toured right before the storm up in Tampa, and Bradenton blew out most of those stormwater parks, and they had amazing, beautiful stormwater parks that tried to accomplish what we did on a really small scale as a community space. Beautiful walkable areas, shade, a lot of absorbent landscape. And I think too often we depend upon the gray infrastructure to hide everything. And it's not really, in South Florida, we should be going backwards in and removing some of these and creating more absorbent and more native vegetations throughout South Florida. With that, that's the end of my presentation. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Just one general question. You mentioned how you would like to scale this project. Has there been any internal dialogue about how you can incorporate this project maybe into comprehensive planning or zoning requirements? or
That's a really good question. We recently completed our update to our comprehensive plan and are now in the process of updating our land development regulations. And in our comprehensive plan, we focus on green infrastructure and contributions. We also have a mobility plan that looks to green streets, looks to the connections to stormwater parks. And so we have other repetitive lost properties, and we're looking for funding now and putting them into our LMS, at least the one that we currently own, so that we can get grant funding to move forward. The councilwoman whose district these two properties are in is very excited about the opportunity of doing the next one. And funding is always, always, always the challenge. This particular project, if we hadn't had a lot of donations, this would have cost about $180,000 to do, because there's not a lot of hard infrastructure. So yes, we are planning for these, and we're actually looking for funding and sites to continue our network.
thank you. Isabel McLean asks, can you provide more detail about how the designer speed dating activity was set up? I would love to try something like this in my own community.
Oh, it was so much fun. So much fun. All right, so once we narrowed down the 40 proposals to three. We organized events at three different venues throughout the city, all that served, excuse me, just a moment, all that had food. Of course, everything revolves around food, right? So we approached those venues and said, hey, we would like to have three spaces in the restaurant where the designers would sit and people would rotate, just like they did in speed dating. So everybody gathered at the front, and they were assigned, you start this table one, table two, table three, and you go and sit there. And then we had a bell, and then you went to the next design team. So it was as simple as that, really and truly. And it was something that I thought was different, and a different way of um, networking as well. But the critical piece was at the beginning, was the where people were networking together before they then started visiting the different design teams.
Awesome. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to raise your hand, type in the chat. Thank you so much, Debbie. This is an amazing project, and I'm so thankful that you guys are leading the way on this. There's so many underutilized sites throughout South Florida that could greatly benefit from a project like this.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for allowing us to share this with everyone.
Asha, if you would like, you can go ahead and start sharing your screen.
Hi, folks. So let me get this up. Can you all see that?
Yep, it's perfect.
Great. So yeah, I'm Asha Birch. I am the horticulturist for the Underline. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you, Debbie, for such an inspiring project and telling us about it. We are, for anyone who doesn't know, the Underline is also taking up revitalizing an underutilized space. So we are the 10-mile linear park that is transforming the space underneath Miami's Metro Rail from the Miami River and the Brickell Station all the way down to Dadeland South Station. and we're converting it into a linear trail, bike path, and pedestrian trail, an urban park, but also an ecological corridor. So what does that mean? What are we creating? So it's a 120-acre park. Approximately 60 acres of that is pervious green infrastructure. So we've got rain gardens, we've got bioswales, retention basins, all to capture that water that's coming off of the surrounding roads, the hardscaping of the trails, and from the metro rail down the columns into providing the water that helps us grow our pollinator gardens and our microforests and over 50,000 plants and trees, composed of over 180 South Florida native plant species. So the first of those I'll mention is our bioswales. The Underline has been open for about 4 years now, and we're operating the first 3 miles of the park. The remaining 7 miles are still under construction. So within those first 3 miles, we've got 4 acres of bioswales. If you look at this picture on the left here, you'll see the pedestrian trail on one side and the bicycle trail on the other side. And in the middle, we have these garden beds that are graded in such a way so that the sheet flow from both paths comes out to the middle and filters in and creates a temporary water feature there. You'll also see that the columns here route all the water that's collected on the metro rail and brings that down into that space as well. So we get sort of a temporary natural stream look for a couple of days. That all soaks up into the garden, and within 1 or 2 days that's gone. So we don't have anything threatening the establishment of mosquito larvae or pathogens or anything like that. I don't know if you can see the photo on the right. In my view, our images are holding that up. Is it like that for all of you?
The 2 images we see are of the bioswale and the
Okay.
that says 13.
So the image on the right, you'll see there's a boulder there. You can see the bioswale. You can see the column. At the bottom of each column is a downspout. So all of the water route that hits the metro rail gets routed down towards each of those columns and comes down out of that spout. So we have these structures here with boulders and then a smaller pea gravel to kind of break up that flow. So it hits that and diverts it into a couple different directions so that it slows that intensity of the water, spreads it into the garden, and it collects in this area. So it sits in the garden for a little bit longer and then has that greater reach to get to more of our plants. So we don't have any irrigation in the entire 10-mile, 120 acres. All of our gardens are rain fed. So this is a really important structure for us. And it creates this temporary aesthetic feature that we get to enjoy during the summer months. In the remaining 7 miles that are under construction currently, we are implementing rain gardens and bioretention basins. And so you can see those in these 2 photographs here. So these are activation areas meant to be places where you can kind of interact with rain and understand it as a space to enjoy the water and enjoy rain and enjoy the features that provide us, the sustenance of what makes Miami summer unique. So we have these raised paths you can see that go over the ponding areas, and water again is directed off of the hardscaping into the gardens and out from the columns into the gardens. It also gives us this opportunity to publicly showcase a set of site appropriate species that can handle this short term of of water inundation and then go through these long dry periods. So folks can see these species and understand if they have places like this in their yard, if we want to replicate this, this is where they can see what those species are and what they look like in action. So we can kind of, in the underline, we can kind of do that trial and error and allow folks to see what's working and what's not working. Image, if you look, you can see basically it's an aerial perspective of the same schematic. We've taken the metro rail out of it so you can actually see the columns. And so the water's kind of collecting in those columns, getting funneled out from each of those downspouts and then directed across. So it's really gathering that water, slowing it down, and finding ways to spread it more efficiently across the entire landscape so we can really create these gardens and have in the ecological corridor that we're talking about. And as Debbie was mentioning, you know, a lot of folks don't really know what those native habitats look like. And so a lot of this project is about bringing those species assemblages back into the front and center where people are getting on the train, getting off the train, and seeing plants that they're not used to seeing. So creating that space of native species and native species assemblages of the pine rockland and the hardwood hammock. So people start to get familiar with what that looks like again, or introduced to it for the first time. So one of those features that we're implementing are microforests. So we've got 10 microforests being installed throughout the 7 miles of the park. For anyone who doesn't know what these are an afforestation technique that was developed in the 1970s in Japan. Basic concept is to plant a high density of native plants, native tree saplings, very close to each other. So that competition sort of drives their upward growth instead of branching out as much. So theoretically, they grow 10 times faster, they're denser, they're more biodiverse. And these are all being modeled after our hardwood hammocks. So we've got 26 hardwood hammock species that are being planted in these little pocket forests that are about the size of a tennis court or smaller. They're great learning places to learn and see what a forest could look like in the middle of the city and be able to see it see it grow in a time that's faster than elsewhere. So this is an image of what our first microforest looks like if you're standing in the middle of it. This was planted in December. You can see a lot of these were planted at about a foot high. They're all about 5 foot high now. So there is definitely a lot of quick growth happening here. So for the 10 microforests, we've got about 24,000 native saplings that are being planted within here. So that's quite an influx of native tree material. Like I said, these are all modeled after the hardwood hammock ecosystem. So it's really bringing that habitat front and center to folks who are in and around town who don't know what a hardwood hammock looks like and get to see it just because they're driving by it on US 1 or getting off the train. These are, they function to increase infiltration. There's a lot of different root systems in here. They're reducing runoff onto US 1 and other neighboring streets. But they're also creating sound buffers. They're capturing carbon. They're reducing temperatures. When we are weeding in here, it's like easily 5 degrees cooler than just a few feet standing outside of it. They're creating habitat. And they're connecting these fragmented ecosystems. So we have near us, we've got Simpson Park, we've got Alice Wainwright Park. Further down south, you've got 80 Doug Barnes and Tropical Park. You've got the Barnacle. You've got all these different parcels of land where birds can find the food sources that they need, or butterflies can find the nectar and pollen sources that they need, but they're really far apart from each other. So the more we can intersperse these dense spaces of the same compatible species throughout there, the more we can connect that pathway for them to more safely get across the city without having to go these long distances without finding food and shelter. And I think it was said earlier, but for us, it's really the plants that are the green infrastructure and understanding how to create that diversity. Um, we've got over 1,000 mature trees. Those are also being up approximately 176,000 gallons of water per year. But it's not just having trees, it's having structure, right? So we make sure to have grasses and ground covers and trees with different canopy heights and shrubs, palms, plants with big leaves and small leaves, and having all of that texture from the top of the canopy to the bottom is what breaks up that rain pattern. It helps water fall more evenly. That's what reduces that intensity and decreases erosion. It covers the soil. The same diversity you're seeing in this image here is what's happening below ground. So you're having that root structure at all these different levels in the soil that's holding the soil together, that's taking in water at different levels. So I think we don't talk enough about the structure that's important and how much it makes a difference to have many species in a space. In this image here, you're seeing, this is probably 30 foot by 15, and there are, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 species just in this little space. And we have gardens like this all throughout the Underline because that structure is just really important to us. We don't have irrigation, and so these different levels of shade that's provided throughout also helps, create the microclimate that allows the other species to then thrive within this space. And then overall, just reducing that pressure to our stormwater system because all of these root systems are taking up this stormwater, and all of these different leaf shapes are really like breaking that system up. The other benefit is that we don't have to use any chemical attributes at all to our gardens. We don't use pesticides. We don't use fertilizers. These are all plants that are super adapted to South Florida. So they're used to our rain patterns. They're used to the pests that are common here, and they've got that resilience to adapt to them. So we don't have to add that additional input, which means that doesn't have to go into our soil, into our groundwater, into our aquifer, into the bay, and into our drinking water. So it's also, filtering all of those pollutants that are coming off in the runoff from the road and from the metro rail. We've got those brake pads going all day long on the metro rail that is getting into the rain as it's coming through those columns, and we're kind of working to filter that through these diverse root systems. And I think I'd like to say that our greatest impact is awareness. We are such a public-facing park. We are directly under the metro rail. We have 8 train stations that empty out into the park. We've got dozens of bus routes, people who are getting on one bus from one part of town, transferring on the Underline, getting on a bus to another part of town. And then we just have thousands of visitors every day, people who get off the Brickell, walk through the park and go to work, people who are walking through the park to get to Publix, go to the grocery store. We have 7 schools that are on the route, and kids walk through that space every day. What they used to walk through was just like a graveyard of abandoned shopping carts and concrete and like abandoned turf. Now they're walking past 60 or 70 species. They're seeing zebra long-winged butterflies, they're seeing Julia butterflies, they're seeing Gulf fritillaries, they're seeing mockingbirds and catbirds, and all of this different diversity that they're getting accustomed to, whether they are conscious of it or not. It's something that they're starting to learn as they're walking to the store, as they're walking to school. This is what's normal. This is what landscaping looks like. these are the plants that I see every day when I go out to purchase plants for myself. When I decide to have a garden, this is what my model is going to be. So that I think is like one of the most impactful things that we have the ability to do, just in the most passive sense of being right there in the middle of it all. We have folks who are driving down US 1. I have people stop me and say that their commute home from work along US 1 has become a lot more engaging now because they're cruising by this sort of drive-through garden where they get to see new plants being planted every day and they get to see butterflies. So that's a really, I think, a really impactful story there. And we have folks asking us, like, what is this species? I want to grow it at home. So we're kind of a really, I like us to be a testing ground because we have all of these amazing native plant species that are not yet really in cultivation. We have them in some nurseries. There are a few plant enthusiasts that know about them, that grow them, that request them, but the demand isn't really there because people don't really know about them. So if we can be that space where people see things for the first time like this, and want to go to their local nurseries and say, I want to grow locustberry, I want to grow silver palm, where can I get these things? And that we start to create that demand, there's the potential to really shift that market to like a broader native palette of species that just aren't in the regular repertoire yet. And there's no reason for them not to be. It's just that people don't know about them. The other great thing is that because we're so urban and because we have the capacity to trial all of these different species, there are a lot of native species that we don't know how well they perform in an urban environment. You're dealing with the wind of cars passing by all day long along US 1. You're dealing with hardscaping and the temperatures from that. You're dealing with the runoff from the metro rail, dogs. You're dealing with dogs urinating on plants all day. So there are a lot of different hazards to these plants that haven't been tested out. And so we get to kind of play with these species that, might do really well in a cultivated backyard where someone has the time for them, but we don't know how well they do in the public landscape. Can they take it? Can we try them out here, see how well they do? If they do great, then we can add them to the palette. And as someone walks through the park, they can say, great, if this works here, I can use it. The housing development I'm working on, I can use it as street planting somewhere else. And if it's not there, then maybe it's like something that we tried, it didn't work. And we know now that that plant is maybe too sensitive for such an urban environment. So I think it's really exciting for us to be in a place where we can really explore what species are going to work and not work and create that palette to help the rest of the city understand what species might work better and how to broaden that space. And then the other thing that we've got tons of school field trips, volunteer activities. We've got people engaging with us all the time. So there's a lot of interest. And learning about plants that nobody really knew were accessible. We have a horticulture apprenticeship that we run every summer with students from Miami-Dade College, and we teach them everything that we do in the garden, which I think is really important. There's a big push and an interest to growing native plants. There's not a lot of knowledge in how to grow them and manage them and maintain them in a way that keeps it looking, it's kind of socially acceptable. So, there's a big learning curve there. And typically what I see is a homeowner gets really excited, plants their yard full of natives. It looks lovely for 6 months. And then they all start growing over each other and competing. They call their local landscaper to come in. They have no idea what they're dealing with. They turn everything into topiary little lollipops and hedges. They take out a lot of native ground covers, and then they just mow and blow the whole space. And it's no longer what it was set out to be. So we're really trying to educate the next generation of folks who are going to work in this industry on what fine pruning looks like and what growing plants in a way that is both has a holistic and natural aesthetic, but is also kind of legible to the public so that, we can get people to grow these plants and then keep those gardens and not give up on them. So hiring folks on a number of levels in that regard. That's where I'll leave you.
Thank you so much, Asha. For the sake of time, I just want to go right into John's presentation. He's going to tell us about FDEP's role in all of these projects and what funding opportunities there are available if you would like to implement a similar project in your community. So with that, go ahead.
All right. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is John Groves, and I am the South Region Coordinator for the State Office of Greenways and Trails within Florida's Department of Environmental Protection. And even though I'm the South Region Coordinator, I am based in Tallahassee. We have 3 different regions throughout the state: North, Central, and South. But today I want to give a brief overview of what our office does, as well as some different programs we have and then funding sources that are available. So at DEP, our office is within the Division of Recreation and Parks, and our main responsibility is compiling and maintaining the Florida Greenways and Trails system. And we work with local counties and cities to update the system map, and that's done on a 5-year cycle. The most recent one was last year, so we won't have a new one until 2029. But a few years before that, we'll reach out to different municipalities to start data gathering for those. So another part of what we do is we work alongside the Florida Greenways and Trails Council. And this council is made up of appointed members as well as government agency representatives. This council meets quarterly, and we rotate. One meeting a year is in Tallahassee, and then the other 3 we rotate to different cities throughout the state. And this council is important because it is able to advise on different trail priorities as well as funding recommendations. So the Florida Greenways and Trails system is comprised of these 3 pieces. First being the priority land trail corridors, the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and then the Florida National Scenic Trail, also known as the Florida Trail. But you can see from this map on the right how these 3 are connected throughout the state. And we also have a paddling trail system that our office manages, and that's comprised of 2 different things, but the first being the extensive Florida Circumnavigational Saltwater Paddling Trail. Quite a mouthful there, but that is a trail that follows the perimeter of the state. And then the rest of the pieces of the paddling trail are either existing or potential designated paddling trails that are either on lakes and rivers throughout the state. And the requirements for those are they have to be a minimum of 3 miles in length, and they need to be navigable during a majority of the year for them to qualify for that. So something else our office does is we help coordinate these statewide regional trail corridors. And the 5 main ones for South Florida, my region, are the East Coast Greenway, the Florida Keys Overseas Heritage Trail, Collier to Polk Trail, the Caloosahatchee Sugar Trail, and the Gulf Coast Trail. And it's important to remember that for these, they're not continuous existing trails, but instead they are corridor lines connecting existing and potential trails, kind of like a center line for that goal there. And As far as I'll talk about a little bit later, but for Sun Trail funding, having your trail on or near one of these corridors helps you with your application for that. So as far as Sun Trail goes, and for those not familiar with this, SUN stands for Shared Use Non-Motorized. So this program is administered by DOT, but our office plays a role in it as well. And like I mentioned, funding priority for these applications is given to trails that are identified as regionally significant or priorities on that corridor map that I just showed. And something also important to remember for these that these projects must be operated and maintained by someone other than DOT. And in the past, this program has been funded at 50 million per year, and the application is open on an annual basis. So if your project gets awarded SunTrail funding, it gets placed on DOT's future work program, which is usually on planning out on a 5-year scale. So like if you get awarded 1 year, it'll probably be 5 years before it's going to be on their program. So I think this map is interesting on the right that you see for the Coast to Coast Trail because it shows how the trail is made up of several smaller segments that have different names, but they're all connected. I think this is probably our one that's the most complete out of all the regional trails. So that one's really interesting to see. And for the SunTrail application, your entity can apply for funding from anything from planning to development of the trail. It does exclude certain things like water trails or on-trail facilities. And basically the SunTrail funds are for planning and construction of the trail itself. So I want to go over something that's really important. This is information from our Office of Greenways and Trails website. So something that we do on a monthly basis is we have a webinar that focuses on outdoor recreation, and we have different guest speakers for different topics. We actually just had one yesterday that was on how MPOs plan and fund trails. And then our next one is going to be on July 9th, and that's going to be on the Legacy Trail. So that's something that our office offers. We also have an online interactive map through our website that you can find land or water trails that are near you. You can kind of zoom in and see them categorized different ways, either paddling or land trails or trails that are on different state or federal properties. And then on the right, you can see that we have Trail Town information. And this is a program we have through our office that I'll kind of go over a little bit next, but this is one of the main areas you can find information on that. So this map shows our regional trails that I talked about earlier, and they're overlaid with our 21 trail towns that are throughout the state. And the 4 in my region are number 1, Dunedin, 20 is Venice, 9 is Everglades City, and then 13 is Winter Haven. I would love to see more in this area, especially you can see a gap down in Southeast Florida along the East Coast. But we currently are working with a city in Martin County to go through this process. So it's moving along, but if anyone's interested, please reach out. But as far as Trail Towns goes, this initiative is something that our office uses to promote tourism through existing trails that intersect at towns that have a trail user focused atmosphere. So these are usually towns that are along one of those regional trail corridors that are it's basically for us a way for us to reward and designate them a trail town for promoting. It can be a paddling trail or a land trail, but for focusing on being a hub for trail users. And we also work with towns that are not quite there yet, but want ideas on how to get there as well. So a trail town's something important for them is to have local businesses that buy into a culture of welcoming trail users into their city. And this could be anywhere from hotels, restaurants, chambers of commerce, or rental shops. And something I want to mention about trail towns is that when we get applications for these, this seems to be the area that needs to be improved the most. Directional and wayfinding signage, which is critical to have for a strong trail town. If anyone's curious about this process, it's pretty simple, but the first step would be to complete a self-assessment, which is on our website. And it can be either a city or a county or a local advocacy group for trails that can fill this out. And then you would return it to the regional coordinator so for South Florida, that would be me. And then the next step would be I would plan a site visit to review the trails, your town, and to meet with local representatives. And then after that, after your town is approved, it gets presented to the Florida Greenways and Trails Council that I mentioned earlier. And then for designated trails, they receive signage, stickers, and a presence on our website to help promote their designation. And on that the left part of the screen, that's just a graphic of our sign that gets put up, but the Explore Trail Towns rectangle there is just the front of a booklet that we have. It's kind of like a passport that you can get stamps or stickers from all the trail towns you visit. You can kind of collect them as you go. So that's something we're excited to be promoting. And then on the right, another thing that trail towns get is a story map that our team develops for each trail town that gets designated. And this is a helpful way for people looking for different places to visit or different trail towns that they haven't been to yet. They can kind of see what's there, get ideas about things to do or what things look like, what the trails have to offer. So that's something we're excited to be doing. And next part, I'm going to talk about some trail-related grants and funding opportunities for the state, federal, and then the private level. So starting with programs at the state level, and no need to write all this down. If anyone needs a PDF version of this, I can be happy to send that out afterwards. So, and my intention for this is to kind of give like just a brief overview and not go much into each individual one too much in depth. And for time's sake, I think I'll just stick to one of these on each of these pages. But the fourth one down on this is the Recreational Trails Program, also known as RTP. This is a very popular program that has annual cycles, and it's mainly for trails, trailside amenities, and trailheads. And it offers a 50-50 match program between our program and the grantee. And that one's administered by the Division of State Lands. And one thing I forgot to mention is just a disclaimer with any of these funding sources. The list here is things that have been available in the past, but each of them needs to be approved on an annual basis into state and federal budgets. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're looking into these. So here's a few more state programs, and one grant administered by DOT is that second one. It's called the Safe Routes to School program, and I think this one's really interesting that it has the intention of encouraging more students to walk or cycle to school. And the hope is that through initiatives like this, walking and biking to school can be both more accessible and safe. So now we're going to move on to grants at the federal level. I'll highlight this top one called the Transportation Alternatives Program. Even though this comes from federal funding, it's administered by our state DOT. And this program helps with provide funding for transportation projects that focus on non-motorized travel choices. And these can also include support for cultural and historical aspects like overlooks or viewing areas. And then I'm going to touch on a few. I have 2 slides of these private grants. So these are ones that aren't necessarily coming through our office, but they are available out there, and we're aware of them, but we just want to pass along the information. So the third one down here is called the Bike Industry Community Grant Program. And this is a unique one that has grants ranging from $5,000 to $10,000. And the goal for this one is to make it easier and safer for people of all ages to bike. So here's a few more private ones. The third one down here, called the Trails Capacity Program, is from an organization called American Trails. And this one targets small local trail projects that both engage the community and connect trail assets to more users. So my goal with this funding talk is to be able to kind of just get a lot of the names out there and just some brief notes on what they offer. But if you have any more questions about those, feel free to reach out and I can kind of go into more depth on any of the ones I mentioned. But I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time, but if anyone needs any more information or has more questions, I'll leave my contact info right here. But happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for staying on a little bit longer than anticipated. If you have questions for John or for Asha, feel free to ask. I'm gonna try and so everyone's allowed to unmute themselves now since I know we're short on time, so you can just come off of mute and ask. But if not, I hope you all have a great day and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And John, we have to get on this southern region trail town. I mean, South Florida is just sad.
Yeah,
In our
yeah.
region.
Central Florida has the majority of them. So
Yeah.
I feel free to spread the word, and it's a pretty simple process. There's a lot of towns that are already doing these things, so we want to be able to designate them.
Mhm. Well,
So,
I will definitely let our constituents know, um, especially now with the development of the Underline and the South Dade Trail, there's a lot of opportunity.
yes,
All right.
definitely.
Well, thank you. I'm going to end the meeting now. Have a great day.
All right.
Have a good
Thank you
one.
for
Thanks,
hosting.
everyone. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Marion.
Bye,
Bye,
Marion.
everybody.